Hey guys, Dr. Tracy here. Got another video for you. My audio looks really low. Let me turn it up. Oh, that's much better. Oh, God, that really got loud. Wake you up a little bit, right? Um, I already made you a video this week talking about JavaScript objects, but I said I would break this one out separately because defining your own objects is much different than using existing JavaScript objects. But it's really important to know how to do this, how to create your own classes so they can be reused. Now note that, as was mentioned earlier, JavaScript is not a true object-oriented programming language. So where we can't actually create classes, we can use objects that are created and we can define custom objects without having the blueprint. So to define custom objects, I put some links up on our page for this week about object-oriented JavaScript that I want to use to help discuss this. To create information about JavaScript classes, I have some links here under additional resources. Classes, object-oriented programming, date, number, math, and then down at the bottom here it says more information on creating JavaScript objects may be found at, and I have Java Tutors and this WSchools. So I'm going to use the WSchools one. In real life, when we have an object, we can define any kind of an object using a property and a method. This example shows a car that can have properties like a name, a model, a weight, a color, and then can have things that it can do like start, drive, brake, or stop. When we define objects within JavaScript, we're doing the same kind of thing. What we're doing is assigning variables. So this example builds a variable called car equals fiat. And the car is, if we create something that has multiple values, you can define a car as having a type of fiat, a model of 500, a color of white. And this is written as name value pairs. This is a way to keep data together in one group to show that it's related. But an object definition is going to create a Java object with an object literal. So in this example, creating a person could have several properties: first name, last name, age, eye color, and they can be set to different values. That, in essence, creates this data center called a person, which is an object. So it will have properties that are now accessed using the dot syntax, object name dot property name. Now this is a little different from other object-oriented programming languages, is that we can access that property directly because it has that lack of encapsulation that I spoke about earlier. Object methods are things that objects can also have, which are things they can do. Typically, you define a function like we saw in previous chapters, and in that function, you define what it does. In this case, the function is going to be full name, which will return this dot first name, which means the object that you were referring to is first name, plus a space, plus this dot last name. So now we have a function that will create called full name, and when you're using full name, the way you can access it is by just doing object with the dot syntax and then the name and the method. Like in this one, name equals person dot full name. The statement right there would only work if person was an object that was created, and the naming rules of creating objects are just the same as they are for variables and functions, in that we can use letters and numbers and underscores, but we can't start it with an underscore or a number. So when we create this without the parentheses, you're going to see it returns the object description, a definition, rather than the result of running the person.full name. So we don't declare strings, numbers, or booleans as objects because they have multiple characters. And this shows an example. I'm going to hop back over to our PowerPoint for this week. In declaring any basic custom objects, as the book states, we use an object name is equal to the new object or we can append it with the dot syntax. So the example that's given here is an inventory list, and it has a date. We're adding the properties using a dot syntax, accessing them directly because JavaScript does not have encapsulation that keeps it separate from the program. When we assign the values to a property when it's first instantiated, it could look something like this directly. Performance tickets is equal to curly brace at the beginning and the end, and then each of those very key value pairs that you want to have assigned to your custom object. The property can also be another object. In this case, you can see an order has within its order an address, which itself is an object containing 4 key value pairs. Referring to object properties as an associative arrays is a common way of showing that anything that defines an object is simply establishing what property it is and what value it can have. So when we build associate arrays, we could build those at runtime even to define the properties that we're doing. For example, now when I call this on as an array, I can call the property, calling it from stoplight colors, and choosing, instead of its index number, calling it according to its key, in this case caution, and that would return yellow. We can also use object to contain various numbers and values, and when we create those numbers, this is showing the example of how to get numbers that might be entered by a user. Generic code adds object properties that incorporate numbers. This is something that could be along the lines of adding items to a shopping cart. By creating and using the document.getElementById, when you put a checklist on something, let's say, because you want to buy it, or you click on it, and using an event listener, then you can show that the current item is whatever item name is being selected. And that could be added to a list of an order to create an object that establishes an order, making it very useful. Any way that you create methods within a class, within an object in JavaScript, is to simply write function with the name, as in that example that I just showed. This is an example of a function within the order, generating an invoice. The / indicates comments of where the statements will then be typed on how what is to be executed in order to generate that invoice. When we say generate invoice and run the function, we're able to open up the function and run that process. This is just going through each of the object properties and deleting the properties if necessary. Every object should have a constructor function, which helps you define which the values are associated with it. Whenever you use a constructor function, you might run into that keyword this. This, wherever this is, it refers to whatever your focus is. In this case, this refers to order. And so you need to trace back whenever you use the this keyword in JavaScript to what it is referring to. All right, I'm going to end it there. That covers the key things out of making objects. I want you to please take a look at these links, and this one too. I didn't turn it as a link. I probably should have. But this link too also gives some interesting tutorials in using objects with Java. And hopefully that helps. And I will talk to you next week.